The myth of Narcissus is a cautionary tale, yet we often reduce it to a simple story about vanity. It was never truly about loving one's own beauty. It was about the tragedy of being trapped in a reflection that possesses no warmth. To be a narcissist is to live in a world where other human beings are merely mirrors, existing only to confirm your own perceived greatness or to soothe your deepest insecurities.
Psychologically, we must distinguish between the myth and the man. Narcissism is not a personality type found in magazines. It is a spectrum of behaviors characterized by an inflated, grandiose self-image. It is a psychological rigidity where the individual genuinely believes they are smarter, more capable, and more deserving of exceptions than those around them, fundamentally altering how they navigate the social landscape.
We categorize these traits into two primary forms: the grandiose and the vulnerable. The grandiose narcissist is the archetypal figure, extroverted, dominant, and relentlessly seeking the center of the stage. They crave power not for the utility of leadership, but for the status that acts as a pedestal for their ego. They are the architects of their own legend, fueled by the attention of the masses. In contrast, the vulnerable narcissist operates in the shadows. They are quiet, reserved, and carry a heavy, silent entitlement. Their ego is not a tower of strength, but a glass house perpetually threatened by the slightest criticism. They do not demand applause. They demand validation through the perceived slight, feeling deeply wronged by a world they believe fails to recognize their hidden superiority. The tragedy of narcissism is rarely felt by the narcissists themselves. It is a peculiar psychological disease where the sufferer feels a sustained, albeit fragile, sense of well-being, while those in their orbit suffer the consequences. Partners and children often become commodities, used as tools to sustain a fragile ego or props to maintain a curated narrative, leading to emotional erosion for everyone involved. When these traits calcify into a clinical disorder, we see the rise of narcissistic personality disorder. It affects a small fraction of the population, predominantly men, and is defined by an absolute inability to bridge the gap between self and other. It is an identity forged in the rejection of empathy, where the need for admiration overrides the fundamental human necessity of connection. Diagnosis is a heavy weight, reserved for adults who have moved past the self-centeredness of childhood. Children are naturally egocentric, a developmental phase that eventually gives way to the realization that other minds exist independently. For the individual with NPD, this bridge was never fully crossed, leaving them trapped in a perpetual state of childhood emotional development, regardless of their chronological age. The etiology of such a disorder is a complex dance of genetics and environment. We know there is a hereditary component, a predisposition coded into the biology, yet the environment acts as the sculptor. A childhood spent on a pedestal, where one is never taught the value of humility, can nurture grandiosity, while cold, clinical neglect fosters the quiet, simmering resentment of the vulnerable type. Culture also plays its part, serving as a feedback loop. Societies that prize individualism and self-promotion above all else create a fertile soil for these traits to flourish. Since the 1970s, as the communal focus of the past eroded into a landscape of material gain and personal branding, we have seen a slow, consistent rise in the markers of narcissistic behavior. The digital age has acted as a catalyst, providing a global stage for the self-promotion that the narcissist craves. While we cannot blame technology for creating the condition, it provides the perfect vacuum for the narcissistic ego to expand. It offers a low-stakes environment to curate a version of oneself that is entirely detached from reality, reinforcing the delusion that the image is the person. The core question remains: can they change? Can someone whose entire psychological foundation is built upon the rejection of external reality ever learn to see themselves objectively? The answer is a difficult, qualified yes. It requires a level of honest reflection that, for a narcissist, feels akin to a physical death, an ego dissolution that most will fight with everything they have. Therapy for such individuals is a grueling process, often marked by resistance and tactical withdrawal. To participate in therapy is to admit that the perfect self is flawed, which is the exact trigger for the shame they spend their lives avoiding. They must be willing to accept that their current view of the world is not a shield, but a self-imposed prison. Practicing compassion, not for oneself, but for the actual, living, breathing people one has disregarded, is the only antidote. It requires the slow, painful work of recognizing that others have interior lives as complex and worthy as one's own. It is the process of individuation, the movement from being the center of a flat, 2D universe to becoming a participant in a multidimensional world. Ultimately, narcissism is a story about the fear of the dark. It is the fear that if you strip away the admiration, the status, and the mask of superiority, you will find someone who is utterly unremarkable, or worse, entirely empty. That fear is what keeps them on the pedestal, even as the structure underneath begins to rot from neglect. For those who love a narcissist, the path is equally perilous. You cannot force them to see the truth of their reflection. You can only maintain the boundaries of your own reality, refusing to become a mirror for their delusions. Healing from these connections requires the recognition that you were never the problem. You were merely a witness to someone else's desperate attempt to avoid their own shadow. The journey of the self is a long, solitary walk back from the edge of the ego. It is a transition from the narcissistic need to be everything to the humble, honest reality of being human. In the end, the only reflection that truly matters is the one that remains when you stop looking for approval and start looking for truth.